All right, Latin 1, welcome back. Now I've got a grammar lesson for you. This is actually something you already kind of know, but I think it's important to go back over it. Chapter 22 really dives into it, and then I'll probably teach you a couple new tenses as well. So let's take a look at something called, is it dative or is it ablative? Now, you may recall that the dative and the ablative look a lot alike in the second declension, both masculine and neuters, and it also looks a lot alike if you have an I stem of the third. So how can you tell the dative from the ablative and vice versa? Well, the thing to keep in mind is their use in the sentence, okay? So a dative is always the dative of reference or a dative of indirect object. And what that means is a dative of reference, okay? I kicked a puppy for you, okay? You benefited from the kick. The puppy received it, but it's not like I kicked the puppy at you or to you. I just kicked it on behalf of you. So you benefit from it. Therefore, it's a reference to you, okay? Or very often you'll see this with impersonal verbs. It is allowed for me to record myself and whatnot. So it is allowed, okay, for me. That for me, that's the part that's dative. The other kind is the indirect object. A little easier to understand, I know, because I taught it to my children just this last week. So if I kick a puppy to you, there you go, okay? You received the puppy, which is the direct object. The puppy received the kick. You still received the benefit of the kick, but you actually received the object that I kicked. Now, the ablative is basically Tislam and everything else, okay? The ablative becomes the catch-all case. Tislam, time, instrument, space. Time, instrument, separation, location, accompaniment, and manner. But also it encompasses the SID space prepositions. And if you just remember SID space prepositions, you have notes on it several times over, then that will help you determine if it's ablative or dative. So let's take a look at some examples, okay? The dative, let's focus on that. There's 5 reasons why we would use the dative right now. Later on, there will be more. But basically, the dative is never used with prepositions. So if you see a preposition, it's not going to be using the dative case, okay? The next one is the dative usually exists when you're dealing with persons. So if you're talking about a boy or a slave or a drover or a carriage driver or a woman or a mother or a father, or you get the idea, persons. Third, there's almost always a transitive verb involved. And if there's not, then it's going to be an impersonal verb, because a transitive verb gets you to the indirect object, and the impersonal verb gets you to the reference. Now, if neither of those are involved, there's still another kind of verb. It's called a special verb. And a lot of these special verbs exist with a preposition attached to it. So, for instance, apropinquo, apropinquare. That takes a dative. And if you look, the only times it doesn't take a dative is because you used ad instead. So those are the 5 reasons for using the dative case that you've run into, okay? No preposition, however, usually a person, and you're either going to have a transitive verb, an impersonal verb, or a special verb. That's not quite transitive, but it frankly feels like it should be. Now the ablative, on the other hand, in our dative versus ablative, is in some ways simpler, but in some ways a lot longer. The ablative is any SID space preposition, okay? Sub, in, de, sine, pro, ob, cum, or ex. And remember, ob and ex can often be abbreviated as a or a. So any of those prepositions absolutely get the ablative case. Also, you'll notice that it may or may not be a person. Okay, I was smacked by my mother. That would be ablative. Or I was smacked with a beating wand. That would also be ablative. Whereas the dative, you're rarely giving something to a thing, okay? You're very often giving something to a person. Also, the verbs are irrelevant. It could be transitive, it could be intransitive, it could be linking, it doesn't matter. And there are some special verbs that do take the ablative from time to time. You'll see more of those in level 2, but I wanted to just kind of put that on your radar. Now let's look at examples. So I color-coded them, and I ran out of space, so it's a little jammed. But Sextus Cornelio pupam dadet. Sextus gave a doll to Cornelius. Now notice Cornelio could be ablative, except for the fact that there's no preposition with him, and also the fact that you do see a direct object, a transitive verb, and you've got that going on. Now that doesn't mean it has to be it has to be dative, but here it very clearly is. There could be a couple ablatives that would exist without a person, but very often if you've got a person, you've also got a preposition. Servi sepulchro propinquant. Like I said, I ran out of space. The slaves approach the tomb. Now, if you did not put ad in front of sepulchro, it becomes dative instead of an accusative. If you put ad, it's accusative and you don't have to worry about it. But the slaves approach the sepulchrum. It's because the verb propinquora means to be near, and then ad plus propinquo turned into apropinquo, and that makes it to approach, to draw near. So, and if you think about it, you are drawing near to something, and it kind of references the thing you're drawing near to. Now, down here in blue, we've got a couple examples of ablative. Cornelia Flavium pilo transfinxit. Okay? Cornelia stabbed Flavia with a javelin. Now, notice pilo could be dative, except that it's not a person. And it could be ablative, and it doesn't have to have any kind of a preposition. If you wanted to, you could have put cum, but that's a little confusing. This means that's the instrument with which she stabbed her. So as you can see there, it's not a person. It is a, what do you call it, a transitive verb, but you're not stabbing her for the javelin, you're stabbing her with the javelin. And then the bottom one, Flavia se defendera manibus non poterat. Flavia was unable to defend herself with her hands. Again, manibus could be ablative, could be dative. But since she's not defending herself on behalf of her hands, or in reference to her hands, she's using her hands as an instrument. And I ended up using two instruments here, and I apologize. But she defended herself with her hands, okay? So that is also going to be an ablative. So some of this is going to be context clues, but also some of it is going to be a little bit of cheat coding, right? So again, your cheat code is, if it's a person, check to see if it's dative. If it's a person and there's a transitive verb and there's already a direct object, really look at dative. If it's not a person, look at your verb. If it's an impersonal verb, take a look for a dative, okay? If it's not those things, then it's ablative. And that's kind of how I've always taught the ablative, is it's just check everything else, and if it's not, it's going to be ablative. Anyway, so I hope that that helps you. I really strongly recommend that you do exercise 22, where did it go? 22F, because it's absolutely about differentiating between the two. But I also think that if you did 22D, you'd be in really good shape as well. Now, any of those that you want to send to me via Google Docs, I strongly recommend it, and I will give you all the feedback that you could get because it's really important to know the difference in those. Now, the next chapter I'm going to go over with you. I'm going to give you the translation for 22, but I'm also going to give you the future tense. So that'll probably be the next grammar lesson that I give you. Anyway, I've missed you guys. I hope all is going well, and I'm going to hit the button now.